واتقوا فتنة لا تصيبن الذين ظلموا منكم خاصة واعلموا أن الله شديد العقاب. وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده فإن لم يستطع فبلسانه فإن لم يستطع فبقلبه وذلك أضعف الإيمان، أو كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. We thank and we praise Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala today as you have taken out your time to listen to a very important reminder of the importance of coming together and uniting save solely for the cause of justice. And before we commence and before we enter into this important discussion dedicated to our sister Aafia Siddiqui, I would like to invite the Qari to do some recitation of the Holy Quran, and through the barakah and blessings to the recitation of the Quran, so that inshallah this is the reminder that only in your listening to the Quran, Almighty Allah reminds us, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and we have revealed from the Quran that which is a shifa, a cure, a healing, and a rahmah and a mercy for the believers. Dr. Aafia Siddiqui has also committed the entire Quran to memory, a hafiz of the Holy Quran. So inshallah, our Qari inshallah will recite now some verses from the Holy Quran.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون. لا يستوي أصحاب النار وأصحاب الجنة، أصحاب الجنة هم الفائزون. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون. هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khairan to Qari Nabil. May Allah Ta'ala reward him abundantly. Beautiful reminder that as we listen to the Holy Quran, Lo anzalna hadha al-Quran, if we reveal this Quran on a mountain, Even the mountain will crush asunder because of the beauty and power of this kalam of word of Almighty Allah. لَرَأَيْتُهُ خَاشِئًا مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. Today we have with us our very esteemed guest, Clive Stafford Smith and Dr. Fowzia Siddiqui. And just a reminder that before I invite Clive, that your coming here is greatly significant. It is also in the light of the words of the Prophet ﷺ, Khairun Nas, the best of people are those who are most beneficial to other people. Anfa'ahum linnas. So if we recognize and understand our purpose of life, yes, our deen and our Islam is based on pillars. We have these very important parts of our deen to establish a connection with Almighty Allah. But this entire creation, al-khalqu iyalullah, the entire creation is the family of Allah. And then from amongst the creation, you will find that we have a duty, responsibility, even for those whom do not even follow a faith, a religion. Ultimately, our deen teaches us that we all should unite when it comes to matter of establishing justice. It is a reminder that just as when we look at how the condition of a people there in Palestine, we say you don't have to be Muslim to support Palestine, you have to be human. This is how Islam has given us, that wherever the Muslim is, the responsibility and duty and our role is to establish justice in the lands. Because if we neglect this great important duty, وَاتَّقُوا فِتْنَةً لَا تُصِيبَنَّ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْكُمْ خَاصَّةً, then beware of that fitna, that trial, that calamity, that test that will come upon those who commit the zulm, the oppression. But the reminder is, it does not exclusively will only come upon those whom are committing the oppression, the aggression, the tyranny. It will also afflict those who are silent. Az-Zalimin, the one who is committing zulm, Almighty Allah will deal with their zulm, their oppression, their aggression. But the main issue that we have, what about those who are silent? Silence is a sign of complicity. In the light of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Man ra'a minkum munkaran, whomsoever of you sees a munkar. Today we are here because we all understand that there is a great munkar, and munkar means an evil, something that is not right. And what is the role and responsibility of every individual? Man ra'a minkum, whomsoever of you. So you don't have to be a scholar or an imam. You're coming here because according to the level of your iman, you will work towards eradicating munkar. Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadihi. Then you have to eradicate and stop that munkar with your hand. This is where those who are in authority, those who are in power, when they see so much of zulm and oppression, even if that zulm and injustice is taken and happening upon a person who is an individual and not a Muslim, then Islam teaches us you have to work to eradicate munkar, injustice. فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ, and if you cannot فَبِلِسَانِهِ, then the next stage is our tongue and use our voice. This is where we have found in the example of Clive Stafford Smith, a human rights lawyer. He is the founder and director of Justice League, a non-profit training center focused on fostering the next generation of human rights advocates. He previously founded and directed the legal action charity Reprieve, and since 1984 he has helped to represent over 400 people facing execution in the US and elsewhere. He also brought the first challenge to Guantanamo Bay, where he has secured the release of 87 detainees and continues to assist the remaining 15. In January 2024, he took on the case of Aafia Siddiqui. Clive has published a number of books two of which were shortlisted for the Orwell Prize.
Just until we get the things here, I'm just going to tell you a couple of random stories. What this is really about is about Aafia and about one of my great heroes who's sitting right there. And I just wanted to tell you, she came over. We finally, thankfully, got her a visa to come to England. And it's a great pleasure and privilege to have her here. But, we haven't given a moment's rest to her until today. And so today, this chap, Farouk, and I took her, it's okay, we'll put it down the bottom, took her to various places that Fowzia wanted to go, including Madame Two Swords. And I'm proud to say that I have a picture of her being greeted by the royal family in Madame Two Swords before Donald Trump. And she was whispering in the ear of Winston Churchill, telling him that he has to help us on Aafia's case. So at least she got a teeny bit of rest and relaxation, but not much. She's been working as she always has. For the last 22 years, Fowzia has devoted so much of her life to her sister. And my mantra, which I repeat all the time, is if you're ever in trouble, you want this woman as your sister. So let's just have a little recognition of Fowzia, if we may. Come on, you clap her. Yeah. All right. Good. Excellent. Well, I think, are we going to have a prayer break after I finally shut up? Is that what we're going to do tonight? Normally, I talk for so long, everyone asks to have a prayer break so they can go and pray that I quietly be sent away from Luton. And I'll try and do that. But I want to tell you the whole story of Aafia. But the point of this is actually not to come to Luton, which is rapidly turning into one of my favorite towns in Britain because I've been here before. It's not just to come and visit you all. It's to figure out what you're going to do to help us get Aafia out and home. And there's not a person. Put your hand up if you think mistakenly that you have no talent that we can use to help get Aafia out of prison. Try to, no. If you do that, I'm going to make you come forward to the front and then I shall harangue you until you admit that you do. You've all got a talent to do it. So let's go through this. But I'm going to tell you the story because I've spent the last 2 years wandering around different countries to try to find the evidence. And it's always about evidence. Law, how many of you want to be lawyers? Don't waste your time. I mean, you can do it if you want, but I just want to tell you, law is utterly irrelevant. Facts are what matters. Investigators are far more important than lawyers. And investigation is fun. You can be a lawyer if you want, although you've got a good head of hair. You don't need to have the wig that those British people wear. And if you're going to do law, don't do English law because it's worthless. In America, we have a lot more power. Let's talk about Aafia. I just want to say this first. Sometimes, of course, people think, again, very misguidedly, that the fact that she ever got arrested means there must be something to explain. Where there's smoke, there's fire. It's so not true. I did death penalty work for over 20 years before 9/11. And then when 9/11 happened and they started Guantanamo Bay, I thought, this is a real issue of principle. The Americans can't. I'm American, by the way. Who's American? I'm British too. I apologize for everybody. But I just couldn't believe the United States was going to put all these people in Guantanamo Bay. And all the people I used to represent on death row were young African-American people who were being blamed for all of our problems in the US. And that was a big lie. But then suddenly, come 9/11, my young black male clients had breathed a sigh of relief because now everyone hated these men with beards. I mean, it's just shocking, right? Truly shocking. And when I saw Guantanamo Bay, obviously the first thing I wanted to do was sue them. Sue George Bush. What could be more fun? But I really thought there would be some explaining to do for a lot of people. I mean, whether the Americans had any role to play in Afghanistan is a big question. I don't think they should have gone there. But nevertheless, when the US said we captured all these people on the battlefield and they're all the worst of the worst terrorists in the world, I knew they'd mess up a lot of the time, because they always do. But I thought there'd be a bunch of people in Guantanamo Bay who really had fought against America and all the rest of it. When I got down there, you know, and as I say, I brought the first case against Gitmo, and I got to be one of the very first people in there. I took 2.5 years. It was really hard to find an honest-to-goodness terrorist. I mean, I was looking very hard. You know, the first person I met was Muazzam Beg. And if you people have met Muazzam, who's I consider a very close friend, there's no less threatening person on the planet than Muazzam. So over the last, it's fabulous. I really, this is what's cool about law, and what comes with it is, you know, I got to sue the most powerful person on earth, and he lost. And that's so much fun. I've sued the president 88 times, and I've lost once. And that's not because I'm so great. That's because the American legal system is very powerful. And so far, of the 780 detainees in Guantanamo, 765 are not there anymore. And of the 15 people left, we've cleared for release 3 of them. So that means that of the people they said were the worst of the worst, we've proven that over 98% had nothing to do with anything. To get out of Guantanamo, you had to convince 6 American intelligence agencies that you were no threat to anyone. And that's what we've done in those cases. And what this illustrates is how they screwed up 98% of the time. So I want you to just think about that as you think about Aafia, because sometimes people think, oh, Aafia must have done something wrong. No, she hasn't. And there's serious reasons for it. And the first is this, that we did what we do best as Americans. We went around giving people money, bribing them. And what we did was we dropped these leaflets all over Afghanistan and Pakistan. And the guy there looks just like my client Abu Imran. Maybe that's who it was. And he was a British guy from in London. And then we'd give lots of people money, and then Abu Imran would end up behind bars. And we were offering between $5,000 and $20 million to people to turn someone in who's a bearded foreign Muslim guy. So look to the person on your right. You have to do this too, except for you. You have to look to the left. I'm offering you, sir, $20 million. And I know the guy on your right. I would rat him out in a minute. So $20 million I'm going to give you. All you have to do is say that he was in Tora Bora in October 2001. They're now negotiating. He's offering $5 million, you know, if he snitches on him, and he'll keep the other $15 million. But this is what happened. And this is why so many people, if you read Pervez Musharraf's dreadful book, In the Line of Fire, which I advise you don't, but just go to page 234. And he says right there that more than half of the prisoners in Guantanamo are there because the Pakistani military trousered the money. That's why they ended up there. That was the first thing. The second reason, which is unique to Aafia, you know, through all of this, I've represented a lot of people in Gitmo, and I thought they couldn't shock me anymore. The story, some of you may know of Binyam Mohammed. Do you know Binyam? Yeah. Binyam's another British person who I represented. And, you know, when I first met Binyam in Guantanamo, we spent 3 days with me interviewing him about how the US had tortured him. And honestly, I didn't think as an American that we were in the business of doing this. You know, I thought come 1980, when we had the Convention Against Torture, that we'd given up on that nonsense. But no, Binyam told me about being taken to Morocco, where they took a razor blade to his genitals every 2 weeks for 1.5 years. Now, what would you not say if they did that to you? What would you confess to? Would you confess to 9/11? Were you a member of 9/11 conspiracy? I'm sorry, sir. I'm just asking you, and I'm threatening you with a razor blade to your genitals. Yeah. You see, we just got another conspirator to the 9/11. It's fabulous, isn't it? So when I was dealing with, they were trying to give the death penalty to Binyam, and we finally knocked them down to life. We knocked them down to 20 years. They came to me and they said, if he would just spend one day in prison and plead guilty, we'd send him home. And I said, if you're going to do that, you're going to just let him go. So he came back to Britain and thankfully got paid a lot of money for what he went through. Not nearly enough for the abuse he suffered. But I thought that they couldn't shock me anymore. And I was wrong. Because when I really got in deep on Aafia's case, it's just exponentially worse. And one of the reasons Aafia ended up where she was, there was the money, $55,000 they paid for Aafia. But beyond that, they did another thing that was unique to her, which is they would show picture books to the people they were torturing. And who knows who Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is? KSM. Yeah, well, yeah, of course you do. I've had him working on it all summer. And, you know, he was supposedly the mastermind of 9/11. And in March 2003, he was abducted on March the 3rd, 2003. The CIA put him in one of those secret prisons, and they started waterboarding him seriously on the 18th of March. And on the 21st of March, they showed him a picture book with a bunch of pictures in it, and they're torturing him into making statements against them. And, you know, I've now looked into all of this stuff. It's just fascinating how many innocent people he identified. But what happened with these men who were being tortured is they're shown all these pictures. One of them was Aafia Siddiqui, for reasons that we can now tell you what they were. But the men who saw her picture told me, some of them, shamefacedly, that they identified her as the big leader of Al-Qaeda because they didn't believe the Americans would believe them, and they didn't believe the Americans would do anything to a woman. Now, that does reflect, in my view, a teeny bit of chauvinism, but that's why they identified Aafia, and that was on March the 21st, 2003. 9 days later, she's abducted with her children on the way to the Karachi airport. And she was driving there with her little infant, Suleiman, 6 months old, Mariam, the little girl there who was 3, and Ahmed, the little boy who was 6. And they're driving to the airport in Karachi because Aafia was going to Islamabad because she was going to do a project on education, which is what her training was. And as they go there, she had the kids, and they were having an argument. She and Ahmed were having an argument. How many of you either had read to you or read to your children Thomas the Tank Engine? Come on, put your hand up if you've read Thomas. I did, yeah, too. Ahmed loved Thomas the Tank Engine, and he was pissed off because they were going by plane and he wanted to go by train. And that was what was going on. And I just think that's one of those sort of human elements of all of this stuff that brings it all to life. And at that point, the US and Pakistani agents abducted them all. And this is the unique aspect of all of this, is you don't have to have children to understand this. Obviously, I got a son. Put your hand up if you've got kids. Can you imagine anything worse than having your children abducted and taken away for torture? Is there anything you can imagine that's worse? I mean, honestly, they can do what they want to me. I don't really care. But if they start doing it to my children, that's a very, very different thing. And this is what the Americans did. It's just extraordinary. The US took Mariam, age 3, remember. She's a US citizen. Does that make any difference? No, not really. I mean, we as Americans do think we're superior to the rest of the world, but it's not actually true. But one thing that you should bear in mind is this is the CIA who were sworn to protect Americans. And they're taking this little American child to Afghanistan. They rename her Fatima, and they forcibly adopt her into a white Christian American CIA family. Now, what's the principle, someone, that makes them do that? What you got to get in the mind when you're a lawyer. I'm going to make you answer this. When you're a lawyer, you've got to get in the mind of the other side. What makes them think it's a good idea to force this little girl into a white Christian American family? Do you want me to answer it for you? Ah, yeah. All right. You know, look, I'm sorry. How many people here think the only way to heaven is to be Christian? I didn't think there were going to be a lot of you. That's the way, you know, but actually, interestingly enough, a lot of you do think that the only way to heaven is to be Muslim. And so you got to get in the minds of these people. That's what the Americans are thinking. They think they're doing a favor to this little girl to take her away from her mother and to America in the end as an American child. You know, at least you understand that. I think they're utterly deranged, but at least you understand it. What you don't understand is this. They took Ahmed, age 6, a child, an American child. They took him all the way to Afghanistan. They put him in prison, for goodness sake. They changed his name to Ihsan Ali, and they said, if you ever say you're Ahmed, we'll kill you. Now, what possible explanation is there for that? You know, really, one of my great ambitions in all of this is to subpoena the CIA to court in New York and just have them explain it to me. I want to know what was going through their minds. So that's what they did to him. Now, the most tragic, perhaps, in all of this is Suleiman. We only have a teeny bit of evidence about what happened to Suleiman, and that's the word of Ahmed, a traumatized 8-year-old boy 5 years later, who remembered them dropping the little infant on his head. That, as you can imagine, you know, they're in a car, right? And they've dragged the first 2 kids away, and Aafia's there, and the CIA people are dragging her with this little baby, and they're trying to take her baby away. You as the mother or the father going to hang on to that baby, right? And somehow, perhaps the baby got dropped and injured. Now, maybe that happened, maybe it didn't. We have no idea. I have a project I'm going to run that I'm going to tell you about it to try to find that out. But I want you first, just in terms of putting yourself in Aafia's position, to consider this. And you've got to choose one way or the other. You're not allowed to sit there and like a lump on a dog. You've got to answer this question. You've got to say, would you rather know that your child 22 years later now is dead so you can grieve and have some sense of catharsis? Or would you rather hold out a little bit of hope that your child is still alive today? You've got to vote one way or the other. Who's going to vote that they'd like to know that your child is dead and try to get past that? I'm watching you. If you don't vote, I'm going to come and torture you because I'm American. I know how to do that. All right. Who's going to hold out a little bit of hope that your child, you haven't voted, mate. You can't go one way. You've got to vote one way or the other. You haven't voted. You've got to vote. You've got to choose because you've got to get inside the minds of people. You can't just sit there. You've got to really get involved in this stuff. Anyway, that's where Aafia is today. Aafia actually has tried to convince herself that Suleiman's dead because she just can't deal with the alternative, which is he spent the last 22 years being raised by someone else. But we'll get to whether that's true or not. Now, they took Aafia to Bagram Air Force Base, and they've lied about it. The CIA's lied wholeheartedly about this for the last 22 years. And this is when you do your law degree, this is what you got to do. You're going to have to think about evidence, right? Because you can't just stand up and say, I'm a lawyer. You've got to believe me that Aafia told me that she was kidnapped and tortured. You've got to prove it. And there are different ways to prove it. And it's actually really fun doing this. I love doing this. But first, you got to get her version of the story and get out to the world what happened to her. What they did to her, Aafia told me this, that they sat her in a chair, they strapped her arms to the chair, they had a one-way glass in front of her where she could see them and they couldn't see her, and they appeared to be torturing children beyond the glass, and they told her those were her children. Now, what would you do about that? What could you possibly do? Would you, if they were doing that to you, ma'am, would you confess to anything they asked you? Yeah, you'd say anything they want to know, right? Now, Aafia did all of that, right? She said she told them whatever they wanted to hear. She wrote whatever they wanted her to write, but they still carry on doing this stuff. And so she was faced with this terrible dilemma. How do I stop them from doing it? And you know what she told me? She's a very intelligent woman. She said, the only thing I could think to do was to act like I didn't care. I thought the only way that would stop them from torturing these children is to pretend I just don't care. Can you imagine being in that position? It's just shocking. Anyway, they've said the CIA won't admit it. So, look, I go to Afghanistan with Mozambique. Mozambique always comes with me. And look, they're very, very nice to me in Afghanistan. I did represent half of the government when they were in Guantanamo. But I went there when the Americans were there, and I was representing some of the Afghans, and boy, was it a dangerous place. But now it's totally calm. It's totally not dangerous at all. It's really, really easy. And they're fabulously helpful to me in trying to come up with evidence. And it's been very interesting going around. People told me, no one will ever talk to you. You're just some old white guy wandering around Afghanistan. The people have come forward in droves because they've wanted for the last 20 years to have someone to talk to, right? To tell their story. This guy here, I love Haji Salim Kuche. Kuche means nomad to the Afghans. And Salim just doesn't like rules, right? I really like this guy. I don't like rules. I got to say, I really hate rules. I hate my older sister telling me what to do. And this is many years on, my poor sister Mary. But anyway, he was put in isolation many, many times in Bagram, and that's where they were holding Aafia for a while. And he was the first person to see Aafia in isolation. But after that, a whole lot of other people did. And this, I actually went to Bagram because the nice people in the current government let me go there and film it all. And this guy, Tapu, is another guy who saw her in isolation. This is obviously not an ideal reproduction of it, but the prisoners in isolation were held in these sort of dog kennel things, which were only about so high, about a meter high. They couldn't stand up or anything. And they had a door at the front with a very small window. And they were a series of them, like where those orange things are, but he was held in one of them and Aafia was held in another. And I got like 8 people who were in that isolation unit to sign affidavits. There were some people who wouldn't, too afraid. They think the Americans are going to drone them or something. But most people would. And so we got all these people to talk about meeting Aafia in the prison. We got a couple of people who were then put in the underground secret prison in Bagram with her. Now, the one I haven't cracked yet, but I'm going to try to do, I'm going there next week, is there's another prison in Kabul that was run by the Afghans. And this was actually very typical. They'd have Afghan guards, but the Americans were in charge. And that was the one where poor Aafia was repeatedly raped as an interrogation method. And you know what Aafia told me about that was that she was in a cell with 2 Afghan women, and this guard would come in and rape them. And these women got together and they tied their arms together. And so when he came in, they took him down and beat the heck out of him. And, who can say that's a bad thing? But after that, Aafia was put in isolation in this prison. But that's a prison I haven't yet found, but I will. So then to prove this, it's one thing to get all these witnesses. This is what you got to do with your life. This is the fun bit. I really like this bit. The Americans came up with all of this evidence that Aafia was a terrible terrorist. Now, did they teach you about how to shoot down satellites at your law school or whatever it is? Did they not teach you that? What sort of useless school do you go to? Unbelievable. What a waste of time. Whoever's paying for that should just ask for their money back. Aafia, at her New York trial, the government, they don't charge her with terrorism because, boy, I wish I'd been representing her when they did. That would be so much fun. But they sneak in all this stuff saying that she was building bombs, she was doing this, that, and the other. And this is bad evidence against her to begin with. But what you have to think about as her lawyer is how can we turn this into really cool evidence against the CIA? And this is a good example of it. Because on your left, you see a page that says, can we cure aging? And, you know, with respect, even this gentleman here can't cure aging, right? Do you agree with me? Yeah. I mean, I don't know who these idiots are who think they can cure aging, but written on there is Aafia's handwriting about how to shoot down satellites. She's obviously much more educated than you. And no one did anything at trial. They just let this in and they didn't say anything about it. But I had my students, like, you know, poor old Farouk over here, do some investigation into this. And we found out where it came from. It came from this Discover magazine, right? Now, is that important? Oh, you bet it is. Because this Discover magazine is dated December 2007, and it's only published in America. So Aafia, wandering around Afghanistan, according to them, couldn't possibly have got this magazine. There's no way she could get that. But it was in the MWR, which is the Morale, Welfare and Recreation Center of Bagram Air Force Base. So you know where this magazine came from. It came from the CIA taking the magazine out of the MWR place and making her write on it. This is intensely powerful evidence that she's telling the truth. And it's not the end. She's had enough of listening to me. She really, no, I'm only kidding. Anyway, and there's lots more of it. This one is the accidental terrorist that they say is evidence of her being a terrorist. It comes from Popular Science in January 2008, only available in America and in the MWR and in Bagram Air Force Base. So this is concrete proof that she's telling the truth and that the CIA is lying. And it goes on and on. Here's a question for you, but please don't answer it because Prevent will come and nab you. Who here has a copy of the homemade Semtex C4's Ugly Sister bomb making book? Whatever I've got a copy, but you know, I can say that. And you know why I can say that? Because I'm what's called an OPWM, which means I'm an old privileged white male, and I can say this stuff, and they're not going to come after me. But I do have a copy. This thing on the left is something that they said she had. It's an exact photocopy of a paper book that she couldn't possibly have got. And the military people would obviously have had it. So, you know, you get these fabulous things that we've developed over the last few months that totally prove what Aafia said was true. Now, what happened in Aafia's case is common with so many of the people I've represented, that the Americans would get terribly excited when they got you. They'd torture you a bit. You'd say you were a member, you actually were behind 9/11, as I recall. And then gradually they'd work out you were in Luton at the time. Is that right? Yeah. And they'd figure out that actually they got it wrong. They're never going to admit they got it wrong, but by and large, they're just going to let people go. Like all 87 of my clients, they've just let them go. And they let them go without an apology, obviously, but they let them go because we were able to show it was all the legal term. This is a legal education for you. Legal term is it was all total bullshit, right? That's the legal term. So make sure you remember that's first legal lesson of the day. So then they normally just let people go. But the problem sometimes comes when someone has become a real embarrassment. And the thing here, Fowzia is somewhere, and I hope she hears this, you know, amazing what this woman did, that she had organized a 1 million person march in Karachi. 1 million people she'd got marching for her. Have you ever organized a 1 million person march? Have you? No, you useless group of people, aren't you? Fowzia got that. Isn't that incredible? No one's done that for me. My sister wouldn't do that for me. She'd have organized a 1 million person march to shut me up. But anyway, this caused a real problem, not for the Americans. The Americans, we're unembarrassable, right? We torture you and then we let you go, and no one, you know, we threaten you that if you ever say anything about it, we'll come and drone you. But the problem was, the Americans want, you know, we're going to let it go. They're worrying about it, but they're not really worried. But the people who are really worried about it are the Pakistanis, right? Who here's a massive fan of Pervez Musharraf? Don't put your hand up. Musharraf had his little dictatorship had gone on, and by July 2008, he was coming to very close to the end of it, right? And indeed, he would fall just a few months later. But they knew, the Pakistanis knew, that if Aafia Siddiqui showed up and she told her story, that she had been abducted by them with the CIA, sold by them to the Americans, tortured, her children taken away, that would have been the end of Pervez Musharraf. So they needed what's called a disposal operation. And, you know, this is one of those many euphemisms that we have in this little world, where we take something absolutely despicable and we just give it a different name. And we've done the Americans have done a number of these things. The most famous, actually, is Ibn Sheikh al-Libi. I don't know how many of you remember him and his case, but Ibn Sheikh al-Libi was one of the very first people in Bagram. He was there with Shaka Rama, who you may know, one of my favorite clients. And Shaka told me the whole story way back when. And he was taken away, and he was thought to be a big member of Al-Qaeda. He wasn't at all. He didn't like Al-Qaeda. But they tortured him into saying, they took him to Egypt. They took electric cattle prods to him, and they got him to say that Al-Qaeda was in league with Saddam Hussein to build weapons of mass destruction. And if you remember, that was one of the 3 reasons the American government gave to go to war with Iraq. Colin Powell actually said it in the UN, and this had come from Sheikh al-Libi. And they could never let him show up in Guantanamo Bay, because if he had, I would have got to meet him. I would have spread all of that around the world, and it would have been really, really embarrassing. Now, we know it's true anyhow, but instead they sent him to Libya and they killed him. You know, Gaddafi killed him, and that's called a disposal operation. The Pakistani government wanted to do the same thing to Aafia, and this is fabulous. This guy on the left is, I think, I haven't got his name yet, but I'll get it eventually, the ISI agent who was tasked with doing this. And I'll tell you about what they had planned. Aafia was being held in Kabul at the time, and they told her that if she would go to this place called Ghazni, which is down the bottom there, I've been there several times, that they would then give her daughter back, and she could buzz off back to Pakistan and live happily ever after if she didn't say anything about what they'd done to her for the previous 5 years. And she was given to go with a young lad, this boy here, who was saying he was Ihsan Ali. It was actually Ahmed, her son. But he was insisting he was Ihsan Ali because he's been tortured for 5 years himself. He's been abused in these institutions. So he says he's Ihsan Ali. Aafia's wearing a full chador, so, you know, he's not sure if this is mum or not. She's not sure that he's her son. And they're sitting on this van with this other guy, the Pakistani guy. And they're going to, now you come back, I've got to say again, because you weren't here, that I said, well, fabulous. No, don't, not at all, but I'm not letting you escape embarrassment. Yeah, exactly. So just give her a little round of applause. 1 million people, she and her mum. I never got to meet her mum, but her mum seems like an extraordinary person. And that was the 2 of them who did that fabulous work and continue to do it. She does. So she's in the van with this lad. They go all the way to Ghazni. They're told to go outside this mosque, the Khalid bin Walid mosque. And if she sits there, she can get her daughter back. And she sits there for 7 hours. And when I went to Ghazni the first time, they said, oh, no one will talk to you. And no one will remember this. I got 6 affidavits in 3 hours from people because they all remembered it. And the reason they remembered it was because of what happened afterwards, of course, but it was also because there was this woman sitting outside an all-male mosque for 7 hours. And, you know, they didn't know what she was doing there, but they didn't want to disturb her. They would try to talk to her, but they spoke Farsi and she spoke something else, which turned out to be Urdu. And so they couldn't communicate. So she was just sitting there. Everyone remembered her and everyone remembered what happened. Now, the idea was that she was going to get killed as a suicide bomber. And what the conspirators had done was first they had dressed her in the chador, so you couldn't see whether she had a bomb on, you know, what do you call it, a suicide belt. Then the boy It was middle of summer, remember? It's quite hot in Afghanistan, middle of summer. He was in a winter coat with 4 big pockets full of fruit. Now, come on, this is an easy one for your law school exam. What are people meant to think about this lad with 4 big things of fruit in a coat? He's a suicide bomber, right? Now we're on the way to graduation to. So that was the idea. Now, if you are a police officer or armed police officer, and you've been told there's a suicide bomber, are you going to go up to him and say, "Hi, how are you doing?" Or are you going to do what they always do, is just shoot them? Anyway, someone, and I know pretty much who it was, had called in a suicide bomber warning 2 days before, saying a woman was going to be sitting outside a mosque and she was a suicide bomber. That meant that the ANP was going to show up, the Afghan National Police, with their AK-47s, and they were just going to shoot them, right? And then when they shot him, the Pakistani ISI guy was going to plant all this evidence on him, and the story would then be evil Aafia Siddiqui suicide bomber, and it would have been more. And she had her son do it too and got him killed. And, that would have been the headline, right? The only reason that wasn't the headline was this chap. He's one of my great heroes. I love him. Mohammed Ajmal Mohammadi. He was a tailor, and he worked right across the street from that mosque. And he had been sitting there watching what was going on all day, and he saw this woman. He saw that no one could talk to her, and he'd done some tailoring in Pakistan, so he speaks perfect Urdu. And in the end, as it's getting dark, around about 7 o'clock, he goes out there and he talks to her. And he says, this is a war zone. It's getting dark. You can't stay out here. My mum lives around the corner. Why don't you stay the night there? And she says to him, well, no, I'm here waiting for someone to deliver my daughter. And they're having this conversation, and he's the first person who's able to talk to her when these people show up. And the Americans say in there, it's fabulous what they say. None of them have been there, of course, so they really wouldn't know better. But they say that there were 2 Afghan police officers who came and arrested her. No, there weren't. There were 40 armed soldiers who ringed her in the standard procedure and were going to shoot her. And the only reason they didn't do it is Mohammadi stood in the way and said, you can't do that. She is alive today because of that man, and that's fabulous. And he had been waiting for almost, it was 17 years until I showed up with Muazzam. And he was so pleased to have someone to talk to. And I was very pleased to meet him, let's face it. So they didn't shoot her, and instead they detained her. Now, later they would say she had a gallon container of cyanide, which is the sort of thing you might notice, but all the witnesses who saw it said she had this little bag of stuff, and it just had some women's clothing and a few notes of money. And so obviously that other stuff was going to be planted on her later. And it was instead planted on her in time for the New York trial. So then they take him to the Afghan National Police headquarters, and it's Aafia and the boy. And, they're asking her questions. One of the Afghan police does admit that he beat her with a stick, which he said it without any compunction. Makes you think they used to do that quite a lot. And she's held there overnight. Now, the next day, the Americans have heard that Aafia Siddiqui has been detained by the police. She hasn't been shot by the police. So they all come swooping into town. They want her back. And remember the key lesson about what do we Americans do when we want something? Come on, you got to remember this stuff. We buy it, we pay for it, right? So they can. I've got this wonderful American intelligence officer who signed a very long affidavit, and I wrote it based on what he said, and then he rewrote it, making it even better. And he said, when he was an intelligence officer in Afghanistan, every Friday, they'd give him $30,000 cash. And so he could bribe the Afghans to do what he wanted. And what happened here is the Americans came to the Afghan National Police headquarters. They asked twice to see Aafia, and the Afghans said, no, she's our prisoner and we're not letting you see her. And then they bribed the chief of police. So they got to see her. And they go up to this room, and I've been to the room. I'll show you a picture in a minute. And they come into the room, and the room is about the size of this stage, a tiny bit smaller. And that end has a curtain across it, and Aafia's behind the curtain. And there's a bed, and that's where she's been sleeping. And so they come into the room, and she hears American voices, and she thinks, oh my goodness, they're going to take me back for more torture. And this is where the stories diverge, and we'll have a vote on who you believe in a minute, right? So her version of the story, which just a little hint is the truth, is that she hears the voices, she thinks, oh my goodness, she peeks around the curtain, and one of the American soldiers, the warrant officer, says, she's on the loose, and shoots her in the stomach. That's her version of the story. That's what really happened. Now, you know absolutely, if that's what happened, that they're in deep trouble now, right? They've just shot an unarmed woman, and even though it's Afghanistan and it's a war zone, they're going to get prosecuted for that. There's quite a lot of that went on. Very few people got convicted, but the Americans would always say, oh, you know, you're really not meant to do that. So you put them on trial and they get acquitted. But so they don't want that. So they come up with an alternative version. And their version is that all of them came into the room. They all sat down. They started having a nice chat. The warrant officer looked behind the curtain, didn't see anything, physically impossible. And then the warrant officer, as you do in a war zone, put his machine gun on the ground, and Aafia reached under the curtain, grabbed the machine gun, flipped off the safety catch. All right, young man, where's the safety catch on an M4 machine gun? Yeah. You have no idea. What are you talking about? And if you say you do have an idea, Prevent will come rushing in here. So that you don't know. I didn't know, but I do know now because I looked at one. And she didn't know. She couldn't flip off the safety catch, but then she starts apparently spraying bullets around the room. One of the American witnesses says, I saw the bullet go past me. Oh, yeah, right. That's Superwoman. And, you know, so she then in self-defense, the warrant officer shot her in the stomach. That's their version of events. Now, if that happened, you might expect a bit of evidence, right? Some of you will have watched CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, which, by the way, is total nonsense. But some of it is a teeny bit true. If you fire an M4 machine gun, which way do the casings eject? Come on. You're not sure? That's a much more honest question, young man. Yeah, answer. They eject to the right normally, although you can have left-handed ones, but they're going to eject. So if you fire bullets, they're going to be casings. If you fire bullets, there are going to be bullets. If you fire bullets, there's going to be GSR, gunshot residue, the stuff coming out of the front of that gun. And so they come up with this whole story that she did this, and then they point to 2 holes in the wall in the room, and they say that's where the bullet hit the wall. Now, you as a keen young investigator would go and dig out the wall and see if you could find the bullet, right? And they did that, but they didn't find a bullet, right? Unfortunately for them, this is the room, this picture I took when I went to the room. There were these 2 holes in the wall. There's a video from that room earlier in the same day, and the holes are already there. So clearly those were not bullet holes fired by, you know, bullets fired by Aafia. The bottom line is they just lied about what Aafia did. But in the end, it actually doesn't make any difference, right? Because if you're a kidnap victim, as Aafia was, she had a legal right to shoot anyone. That's the law. If you've been kidnapped, don't do this, by the way. I'm not keen on shooting anyone. But if you are under kidnap, young man, you're allowed to shoot your kidnappers. Don't do it. Just don't get kidnapped, all right? Okay, so anyway, they take her, they took, I just want to talk about what happened with the kids, because there's a couple of other, you know, gratuitously embarrassing things I need to say about Fowzia here. So he's only home, Ahmad is home, because Fowzia chased after him all around Afghanistan until she found him. And Fowzia, since that time, this was 2008, is now 17 years later, she's brought the lad up, and he's now a qualified doctor, and that's astounding. Now, when Fowzia figured out that her sister and Ahmed were in Afghanistan, she starts looking in Afghanistan for Mariam too, and potentially Suleiman. But you've got to remember, they had no idea where these folk had been. And so she then, at the suggestion of a Pakistani politician, went to see someone in Islamabad, and that someone happened to be this chap, Hamid Karzai, and he was then president of Afghanistan. And she told him the whole sad story, and he was touched. He's not an altogether bad guy. He's living in Kabul now. And he went back to Kabul, and he told the Americans, "You've got to give the little girl back." And they did. They summoned him to the secret police headquarters, and they turned Mariam over to Hamid Karzai. And Karzai said to them, "Where's this little girl been for the last 7 years?" And the CIA says, "We're not going to tell you." Now, that's kind of cool, right? Because I don't know in your legal career how many presidents you've had as star witnesses in your case, but I've got Hamid Karzai. And when I told the US attorneys that in New York the other day, they're quite intimidated, because it's going to be hard for them to keep on fibbing about whether the CIA took these children away when we got the president of Afghanistan saying it's true. Now, the only reason she's back, Mariam, is due to the efforts of Fowzia. And no, don't clap yet, because there's more to come. She's got Mariam through medical school, and Mariam just qualified as a doctor. You're really not enjoying this, Fowzia, as they do it. I do enjoy embarrassing her, but she so deserves it, right? She's a total hero. She's the hero of all of this. Now, then we've got what happened to Suleiman. I don't know whether, I initially thought you've got to be really stupid to think the kid's still alive, but I'm not sure that's right. After you see what happened to Mariam, it's possible he's alive. And what really convinced me was when I was in Afghanistan, I discovered that in the last year of the American occupation, we took 1,450 little Afghan children and took them all to America without asking anyone's permission, on the principle that there's going to be better life for them in America, and then all these Americans can adopt a child. Now, again, you understand where they're coming from, but it's just awful. You can't do that. You can't go down around the world kidnapping children who you want to adopt. And, one of the projects I want to do that you people need to help me out on is to get those children back, right? But it does make you think that it's quite possible that the little infant, 6 months old, wouldn't have even known who he was taken the same way, right? So one thing, a project I want to do, and I really need the help of someone who knows how to organize one of these things, is I want to do a project called Searching for Suleiman. And we've got AI reproductions. That's him when he would have been, 3 or 4. That's him when he's maybe 10. That's him when he's 18. And that's him today. And I want to run those pictures across America and see if some child wants to come forward saying, I think I'm from Pakistani background. I was adopted. I don't know who my real parents are. Because then if we were able to DNA him, it would be good. I'm not into breaking up whatever love bonds there are between him and his adoptive parents, but he has the right to know who his real parents are. And you also know the number one rule in your legal career is you're never trying to get sympathy for someone. You're always trying to get empathy for the people you're representing. And people can't empathize with Aafia because they can't empathize with being innocent in prison serving 86 years. They can't really empathize in being tortured, but they can empathize with this whole business of what happened to our children. And it's the way that we can get even hard-hearted Americans to get, and they're not all hard-hearted, there are very good people in America, to help us. So I want to run that project, and I want someone to help me on this. And then, we have what happened to Aafia. She was taken around the world illegally. It's called rendered. And she was taken to New York. She was tried in New York, obviously, in the Southern District of New York, because the courthouse where I was at last week is less than 1 mile from ground zero. How easy is it going to be to get a fair jury in a terrorism case in the Southern District of New York? Southern District has a 99.5% conviction rate. 99.5%. 1 person in 200 doesn't get convicted. So that's where she was taken, and she was given 86 years in prison. And, you know, I had 63 wonderful young people. Oh, is that what a great thing. Who's that for? All right. Well, what about, I won't be much longer. Is that? No, right. Okay, no, I'm just going to finish this off quickly because I know you got prayers. I always get told this. I'm committing some blasphemous thing. But my students this summer went through every single attempted murder case. That's what they convicted Aafia for, and went through every single one in the 41 years since we got the sentencing guidelines. And Aafia has the 2nd longest sentence of anyone in America federally convicted of of attempted murder. I mean, it's just shocking. And she's in FMC Carswell, where when I went to see her for the first time, she told me about being raped. She told me about being sexually assaulted. And, you know, I was a teeny bit skeptical to begin with, but then I looked into it. It has FMC Carswell. I've been to every major prison in America. I've been to every death row pretty much. I've been to Guantanamo 42 times. FMC Carswell is the worst place I've ever been to. And they have the worst sexual assault rate of any prison in America. They've had 13 employees, guards, convicted of rape, including a Christian minister, and Aafia is stuck in this awful place. So this is the real issue.